everyone is carried along. But as it is with every other area of life, we find out that it is not, we don't have a perfect situation here. And there are a lot of people, especially in our own part of the continent, where we find out that we have a lot of people who are not being carried along, who are being left behind. And effect to make sure that everyone is carried along, especially as it has to do with the digital economy. So that is why this morning we are going to be talking about how to identify these gaps and provide solutions towards bridging those gaps. And joining me this morning in this conversation are two great voices in the African continent in the area of digital inclusion. And they are good. I believe that at the end of the day, that we are going to do justice to this topic, and that everyone that is participating in this section is going to go home with something, because I know in one way or the other that in our communities, in one way or the other, we are playing one role or the other in the digital inclusion sphere, or we have interest. So in any area we are coming in from, I'm looking forward that by the end of this session, that we will all have something to go home with in our desire to make sure that no one is left behind as the world is being digitized. So at this point, I'm going to give the mic to the two persons that are going to be joining me in this section to introduce themselves. And before I do that, I'm going to set the pace in that by the time we start, after they've introduced themselves, we are going to go into the conversation proper. And I'm going to advise everyone participating, please take advantage of the chat box. If you have questions, please drop them there. We will see them and we will leave them, and we will be able to get them across to the speakers to respond to your questions. And by the time we are done with the conversations, we are going to also have a Q&A section where we will give people who are not able to drop questions here to be able to ask questions to the speakers and the organizers of this session. So that is how we are going to also be. If you have any question as the conversations are going on, please make sure you go to the chat section and drop your questions, and we'll be able to leave them and then respond to them. Thank you so much. And at this point, I'm going to give the mic to Dennis. They are to give a brief introduction of himself to the participants. Stephen, Dennis, the mic over to you.
Hey, good morning. I hope you can hear me. It's exciting today to join young people around the continent and to talk about issues related to digital economy and the digital divide. My name is Caldena Dennis. I am in Juba right now, and I'm glad to be part of this conversation. I look forward to discussing more and also to knowing more from the rest of the participants and from your questions, and how we can work together in bridging the digital divide. Thank you.
Winston, you are muted.
Oh, thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you so much, Dennis. Looking forward to having a wonderful conversation this morning. And I will also want Nashilongo, my next speaker, to introduce herself to the participants.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. I'm also very excited to be joining and meeting everyone today. I'm joining from Windhoek, Namibia, and Southern Africa. As usual, always excited to be engaging in continental issues. I look forward to the discussion on the digital economy on the continent, very pertinent, also very, very necessary. So thank you for having me, Iweza, and the entire West African IGF organizing team. Thank you. User, you might be
muted. You're muted.
Oh, yeah. So sorry. If we say that everything is okay, we might not be telling ourselves the truth. And that is the reason why today we are going to dive deep into this conversation. And I'm going to start with Nashilongo. With your experience, I know, like you rightly mentioned here this morning, you have been engaged, you are involved, and you have interest in the digital economy as it has to do with Africa. In the course of your interaction and your work on the continent, what are the digital device issues that you have identified, and what are their implications to the disadvantaged or underserved communities across Africa? Nashilongo.
Thank you, Iweza, again. And for the sake of the conversation, I'll try and limit my my video stream because my network can be very unstable. But thank you. Yes, so let's perhaps start off by just giving an overview of the digital economies or economies. Yes. So we know that, for instance, that the digital technologies offers a chance to disrupt the trajectory of the lack of development on the continent. It offers new paths for rapid economic growth, innovations, job creation, and also offers access to services which have been unimaginable in a decade some times ago. So given the current incremental pace of economic and social advancement, too many African countries obviously find the opportunity to tap into, and especially the youth population finds that. But there are also pertinent issues amongst those, the growing digital divide as we are engaging on today, but also increased cyber risks. This needs urgent and coordinated action to mitigate. So to go to your questions, the main challenges facing Africa in general, I want to believe, is access to ICTs that enables them to engage in the digital economies. And those are enabled by various factors, such as lack of adequate skills amongst others, but also others such as unaffordable devices and broadband unavailability, to mention just a few. Obviously, there's so much we can do as a continent, and as usual, this requires the multi-stakeholder approach that all players players within the IGF sectors need to play. For instance, enable a policy and regulatory framework that is enabling this development and participation and within the digital economy, obviously. And lack of infrastructures or challenges with infrastructures are also some of the issues, but so many others as well. Lack of investment, governance issues in general, but also a lack of responsive policies that enables all to benefit from the digital economy. I wonder if I could end there for now, Iweza.
All right. Thank you so much, Nashilongo. Thank you so much. We thank you so much. Dennis, we know you are doing great work on the South Sudan side of Africa. Can you share in your own experience what you have identified or what you think are the general challenges and also the implication also.
Thank you so much. And I also want to thank my colleague who spoke before that and mentioned very, very important points. And these points are actually covering all over Africa. And South Sudan is not exceptional when we talk about poor infrastructure, when we talk about the access to affordable internet, connectivity, and also government intervention in terms of policies. And when we talk about digital skills for people. Now, South Sudan being a country that they call it still new, you know, in the world, but South Sudan is not new. The people in the country are not new. And South Sudan as a country has a lot of things to catch up with, for example, from development. And one of the conversations is around the digital inclusion. But then we have very few actors in the ecosystem who are talking about this. Now, like me, from my background in ICT, because that is what I studied, I come from this background where people think that ICT, when you go to the university, for example, to study ICT, then you are not doing anything important to the community. And that kind of thinking, you know, is so heavy in the hearts of many young people and many people. So you find that people who take the STEM courses at the universities, they are very few. And that has been a very big challenge. Now, since then, my work has been to make sure that I do a lot of advocacy and also trying to create awareness among the young people so that they understand why it's very important for us to know what is happening in the digital economy. I always tell our youth in every gathering that I go to that the digital economy we used to hear right now is like the COVID. You know, when COVID came in, people used to think it is for China, and people think, you know, it's for China and we are safe this side. And it's the same conversation that is happening. And now, what happened during the COVID is that many countries were taken by surprise because they were not prepared, you know, for the COVID. And it's the same conversation about the digital economy. People used to hear that the technology or innovations is for the Western world, but now, right now, we are already getting in there. Now, in South Sudan, one biggest challenge I have realized is that our education curriculum is a very, very big challenge. For example, in terms of digital inclusivity, we have the computer literacy, which is there in secondary schools, but we find that very few students take that course actually, and when they're sitting for their senior for exams. And we find that when students go to the university, they still don't have the skills that they need even to do their research when it comes to usage of computer, leave alone having access to computers or even mobile data. Now, another problem in South Sudan is that which can be general, is that the lack of competition among the internet service providers. Currently, we have MTN, which is more dominant, and we have also Zain in South Sudan. Recently, we have a new telecom company called the Digital, which came into the market a little bit, kind of trying to shake that one, but the lack of competition in that most of these dominant companies, you know, they normally take advantage of they take advantage of the citizens in making sure that they said internet is very expensive. Very few people have, you know, smartphones, but for them to access the internet, that alone is a very, very big challenge in the country. And every day people complain when you go on the social media, when you go on the internet, people always complain about how expensive the internet has been and trying to advocate, trying to raise a concern, because here we have a body called the National Communications Authority, which is regulating almost everything to do with the telecom industry. But then their response is very slow. They try to put a system where citizens can raise their concerns, but it's not happening. So the challenge is that my other person talked about is really a big challenge. And right now the conversation in South Sudan is that the government is moving to the digital platforms, the e-governance. And then the question is that are the people, even the people in the government, are they prepared to move to the digital platforms, because right now we have like the e-visa system, the e-taxation portals, which are already launched, but I find that the people who still use them, there are very few. And that's why the question came in terms of capacity building of the people. Like, do they really have the skills to administer these portals? So this brings the question of capacity building. This is one of the biggest challenges. Much as we want to go to the digital economy, talk about digital inclusivity, but the capacity of our people and the skills that they need is very, very important. So this has been a very big challenge, among others that I could mention here, in terms of the government interventions, the policies. In South Sudan, we have very few policies right now, but they're still not being put in practice. Some bills, like on the data privacy, access to information bills, and the cybersecurity bills. So those are all bills which are related to the digital economy, but then they are not yet in use. So this is what is happening in the country. If there's anything, I'll come back later. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dennis. As you are just talking, I was just seeing my own side of the world in most of the things you just mentioned here. Like to say that most of these problems, as it has to do with Africa, is sort of universal here. Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to come back to you on this. But before we continue, my third speaker joined where the conversation has started. At this point, I want to give the mic to Dr. Millicent to just introduce ourselves briefly to the participant before we continue with the conversation. Dr. Millicent.
Yeah, hello everyone. Sorry, I'm out of station, so if I'm not using video, because the internet there is not so strong. The Dr. Millicent Aganjeba. I'm a lecturer at the University of Mines and Technology in Ghana, and also the Executive Director of Inclusive Tech Group, where we are advocating for inclusive society, digital society for persons with disability. So that's what I can say about myself now, and I'm happy to join this session. Very important discussion that is going on here, and I think digital divide is something that should be a top priority now. Thank you.
All right, why the mic is still with you, Dr. Millicent, let me not move away from you yet. We've been looking at the challenges, that are the digital divide challenges. And good thing you are from the West African part of Africa, where we are focusing on this time around, especially in this Internet Governance Forum. Please, can you tell us some of, in your own experience, in the course of your work, some of the challenges you've experienced and the implication, because we are mostly looking at the underserved or disadvantaged communities as it has to do with them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Personally, I think that when we talk about digital, it underpins many of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that we looking to achieve as people. We talk of industry innovation, smart and sustainable cities, talk about gender equality, good health, quality education, everything borders on digital. And so we need very strong information and telecommunication technology systems to become, to make sure that all that we're talking about becomes a reality. Today we hear so many terms. We are using digital divide. Some people say digital exclusion, info exclusion, so many terminologies. But the truth is, if you look at our West African terrain, let me be specific, Ghana. Ghana is touted a pace setter when it comes to e-government. And it's ranked, in fact, first on the e-government ladder in terms of the use of ICT in the mainstream activities of government. But the general problem, I think, which is not very specific to Ghana, but West Africa as a whole, is lack of ICT infrastructure. We have issue of low literacy rate, though I must admit that in Ghana, low literacy rate is not a big deal. Literacy rate in Ghana is quite high. But what we have is low ICT literacy. And so it's not just the low literacy, but low ICT literacy. And then also limited access to internet and the lack of awareness, which is a big issue, like my earlier speaker talked about. Sometimes people are just not aware. So when you come to Ghana here, since 2008, a lot have been going on in the government mainstream in terms of the internet governance. Most government services have moved online, but you talk to people and a lot of people are not aware of what is happening around them. So lack of awareness alone, it's enough to create that digital divide. Quite a number of people use smartphones, but they are not aware of such services. And so the bigger picture that we have to look at, especially I think in Ghana here, where government is always receiving a lot of praise for setting the pace in West Africa. I think to make sure that we integrate, the inclusivity we are talking about must be felt. We look at the gap between the rural and the urban. We look at the marginalized groups, such as persons with disabilities, female children, and make sure that we are integrating everybody in order to achieve this common objective of having a digitalized society, which is more inclusive. And so from my end here, that is what I see. And because my outfit also works a lot with persons with disability, I can say that the digital divide, you can see it there. Many a times you offer training, and even some of them are in the university, but because they don't have the prerequisite, the necessary resource to train them, training for the disabled in ICT, depending on the kind of disability, needs different kind of resources, and institutions are not willing to do that. So they are there at the university level, all right? That's why I said literacy is not a problem per se, it's not a major problem, but ICT literacy, that's a major problem here in Ghana. So that's what I'll say for now, and I'm sure I'll come in again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Millicent. Thank you so much. I'm just feeling like I'm a child of Africa, because most of what you're saying here, which is what we are trying to elicit today, you find out that in the work we do during to put a point to what you people are saying, during the pandemic, we were running a training before the pandemic came, and we had to abruptly stop the training. So we found out that in our course or in our efforts to make sure that these young people continue the training even while they were at home, we encountered most of these things that are being mentioned here. We'll find out at a point where we even went ahead to give internet subscription to them. Most of these other things, we'll find out that even with the internet subscription and most of the efforts we put to make sure that they had continuous training, most of them we are not able to take part in those training because of most of what we are talking about here. You find out most times some of them will tell you at home they don't have the devices that can help them to connect. Those that have the devices will tell you poor internet connection, and a whole lot of most of these other things. And the other one, which is lack of awareness. We'll find out that, not minding that these children have spent some days with us, some of the platforms we wanted to deliver this training through, most of them were not conversant with them. So that was a very, very great challenge, not minding our effort and willingness to continue that training. We'll find out that these challenges prevented us from doing that. And those are part of the things we are having seen that these things are almost the same across the continent, across our countries. We are going to go forward, because one thing is identifying the problems. Then another thing, which is one of the major things why we are here today, is to put us together and get from our experiences. What can we do to address these challenges? Nashilongo, I'm coming back to you again. You've heard me, you've heard the other speakers. What do you think should be done to address these challenges that have been identified here, and even the ones that we've not identified yet?
thank you, Ihuze. I want to just post-reflect on what my colleagues contributions earlier regarding skills, but also regarding education in general before I come to what can be done. We have recently found out that, for instance, ICT skills education in Namibia is not compulsory. It means that it is not a passing subject. It is not a priority for one, the teachers to teach, two, for students to take up on. So that sort of falls back or push back the narrative that we're trying to push here, to ensure that everybody benefit from ICT skills, and that is actually the future of development in general, and is obviously also touching all the other SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals, as Dr. Millicent have mentioned. So given that, we found out that many of the teachers don't even put in effort to teach the subject because it is not compulsory. It is not, I think there's a word for it. So that even adds to the challenges of the ICT skills in general. For instance, in my country, during COVID, we also found out that there's only 30% of the public schools had access to the internet. Nonetheless, that means that students anyway were not at school, and so were teachers. So that had a least impact on the dimensions of education at the time. But what that tells us is that within those communities of the 70% that has no access to the to ICT skills, that means that those students and those teachers have never used ICT enabling or ICT aids or technology aids within the education system. So moving completely to remote education, or what was called also the e-learning, became very, very challenging at that time. I think our latest data or report have indicated that over 30,000 students were not able to access education during the time of the complete lockdown in our country last year, over the period of, I think, about 8 months or 6 months last year. So those are the challenges. So what needs to be done is really maybe multi-dimensional. One, the private sector has a role to play in one, ensuring investments for infrastructures, but also investments in skills. What we have seen, for instance, we have one of our big telcos in the country, also government owned, but we see the kind of developments that they do in the country. I think recently they have launched or supported partnered with one of the universities and came up with a high-performing ICT center or institute within the country. But even with those, the challenges has always been, how do we move beyond the cities? How do we move beyond the communities that are already connected to get to the rural areas where the challenges of the 70% of schools that are not connected, are key. So yes, so the private sector has a lot to do beyond the usual social corporate responsibility, to partnering, to go into the development sector, to work hand in hand with government and its sectors in making sure that infrastructures and skills are in place. That's one, but also the developing sectors. I think in the overarching digital economy, I would want to highlight that, for instance, we see the startup communities, and I mean, I think you colleagues in West Africa possibly have benefited more in, you know, with your digital, with your startup communities. We see most of your applications or most of your products, you know, being uptaken by the global communities and using those to solve solutions, not just within your localities, but also globally. So I think that is very key. So there's a need for intentional investment in the innovation sector to obviously support the young people who are very key within that sector, with helping their products into the stages and into the phases to a point where they benefit countries or solve local solutions all in total. So the developing sector, but also from a policy perspective, of which I have been more very involved in, especially from a research perspective, but also in my involvement with the Namibia Internet Governance Forum, is that to make sure that our policies are in place, and when they are in place, that they are responsive enough to the changes and the challenges that happens within the digital ecosystem. You might have known, for instance, that not a lot of countries on the African continent have in place their data protection policies, and which is very key to ensure that the users are protected, but also their businesses are protected. But also, you know, your cybersecurity bills. For instance, in Namibia, those two bills are not yet in place, even though there have been talks, and I think the cybersecurity bill is in a draft form. I think headed to finalization, and the data protection is really in the infancy of the development. But I mean, policies and regulations are good to have. But if we do not have close monitoring systems, but also funds or budgets to ensure that the implementation take place, then we are not getting to go very far. So again, the challenges we faced in the digital within the digital divide as a component of what we're trying to discuss here is very multi-sectoral, that everybody has to play. Civil society, we've seen, for instance, our friends and partners of Paradigm Initiative in Nigeria, how they have that digital ICT skills that is going around the country, and it needs that kind of effort from all over to make sure that people have the skills, so that when their infrastructures are available, everybody is able to benefit from them completely. Let me end here, Iwuze, for now.
Thank you so much, Nashilongo. You just you struck a very wonderful point here, where you mentioned the multi-sectoral approach, which we can also call the multi-stakeholder approach. To tell you the truth, most of these challenges that we've identified and what we are seeing going on in Africa, especially as it has to do with connecting the unconnected, it is not a one person or even government work alone. So that is why I strongly believe with you that all hands should be on deck to make sure that we achieve all these things that we are talking about. I will now come back again to Dr. Millicent. We are still looking at solutions. We know that these things have their different strokes for different folks. We want to come from your own angle. What do you think should be done? Like you said, I was so impressed when you mentioned that you work with disabled people, because one of the things we've noticed in our work is that most times when we are talking about inclusion, that's one set of people that we've paid so much less attention to, because you find out that a whole lot of things is against them, from the design of the digital devices and all these other things that would drive the digital economy. You find out that most times when they are being developed, this group of people are not usually considered. Please, I'm asking, what do you think we should do, bearing in mind the disadvantaged group, especially the people you work with? Dr. Millicent.
Yeah, thank you. I want to start off perhaps with a very salient point that was mentioned by Nurse Lungo. I couldn't agree less that ICT in our era has to be a compulsory subject, okay? It has to be, it's no longer optional. And you come to Ghana, I mean, if you don't even pass ICT, you can go to the university. Once you pass your mathematics and science and English. But going forward, we have to make ICT part of the compulsory subject so that people can take it serious. The one who is the instructor and the learner, everybody will approach it seriously. Let's also not forget, I don't know what is happening the other parts of the world though, but here in Ghana, I have met people who just naturally want to resist technology, religious reasons, so many funny reasons. They just want to resist technology. Very educated, highly, some even have PhD, but they want to resist technology. They don't want to use technology. And so some superstitions, some beliefs tend to affect, the move sometimes also, because you'll be wondering why somebody like that will want to resist technology because of some sort of belief. But then going forward, I think here in Ghana, way back 2008, when we started implementing the internet governance and we passed the Electronic Transaction Act in 2008, it looked like we were very much ready to be on the move. And we've passed several policies or acts, including the data protection way back in 2012. But the problem has been the will to enforce the implementation. The implementation, yes, on paper we have beautiful laws, but the implementation have been quite slow. And that is one thing that seems to affect us. When you talk of persons with disability, you realize that we even have a disability policy here in Ghana, and we have ratified and also we align with the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability. But still more, there is so much to be done because they are way behind when we talk about issues of disability and digital inclusion here in Ghana. For me, I think that for us to have a good understanding of digital divide, we should not only look at it as an access to ICT. The access is not enough. Just like you mentioned, the quality of device, technical accessibility of the online services provided, very critical, because you can have things online, but when people go there, you don't care. We have low vision people, we have deaf, we have different groups of people all among us, and they are not able to access it. And so, yes, they have been given training, they know how to use ICT and we put things online. That is not enough. So technical accessibility of online services is also very crucial so that people go online and they are able to access. I had an encounter with one blind man who wanted to apply for this passport online. And all e-passports, or what we call our electronic passport portal, the person gets there and it's stuck because of the way they design it. Some things is supposed to feed the system with some information, but then there is no alternative text, it's only picture. So it's not able to tell what it's supposed to upload at that point. And so these are some of the things we don't really take into consideration, but we feel, yes, we have put things online there, everybody should be able to use it. But we don't look at the specialized needs of others as well, where designers design just assuming everybody is like them, everybody has 2 eyes and 2 hands and legs and can hear and talk. That is so wrong. Self-assumption. You are designing for the user and not for yourself. And so I think that there is a lot to do when it comes to digital inclusion for persons with disability. Our outfit is really passionate about it, trying to create more awareness on technical accessibility of online devices for developers and designers so that they can have a better appreciation of what it means to have accessible services online, as well as giving training to persons with disability also. One thing that we have to know is disability is not a respecter of anyone. And anybody at any point in time can potentially be called a disabled person. And so we have people, quite recently, one of the trainings we did, who is a secretary working okay, and at 45 just goes blind. She's not sure what happened though, but she can't see. And so such a person will also need to be retrained. And so training always has to be ongoing for this person, because he was seeing all right when he was using the internet and working and everything. But now that she can see, what happens? He needs to be retrained how to use screen readers and so on to be able to access content online, so that the person doesn't become a liability, is still able to live a very decent life. One of the things that we seek to achieve in terms of sustainable development goals. So from our end here, I think there is still a lot to be done, when it comes to digital inclusion for persons with disability. Assistive technologies are quite expensive. Most of them have to be imported. We don't have local content. And once you don't have local content, you put a screen reader and it just goes like, it's talking to one British person. And people will ask you, can we get in our local language and, a Ghanaian accent so that we can follow, because this one is like a British talking to us and we don't get it. So investing so much also into assistive technology research needs to be done, and currently we don't see it. And these are some of the challenges that we're going through here. I'll end here for now and I'll come back.
Thank you so much, Doctor. You see how it's flowing, because the point you made now corroborates what Nashilongo said about encouraging local innovation. Because I find out that if we do that, like most of these other problems in developing assistive technologies, if we go ahead to develop local innovation, it is going to help us going a long way to be able to solve these particular problems. And like you also mentioned, cost. It will, because we'll find out that if these things are developed locally, it is going to help us to make the prices or the cost to be cheap. So it is a very wonderful thing that as we are doing this, that some of the points that have come out here to at this point is that there is need to develop local skills. There's need to localize as we are looking for solutions. There's need not to always depend on getting help from abroad. Thank you so much. And I will come back to Dennis. We are looking at solution. Dennis, you've heard Nashilongo, you've heard Dr. Millicent. From your own point of view, what can we do to overcome these challenges?
Thank you so much. Ihueze, I don't know if I pronounced your name right. And I love the presentation by Dr. Millicent, also from her point of view, and what Shilongo said. It's very sad that in Namibia, ICT skills is not considered a priority in the education sector. And I believe that it's only not in Namibia, but many other countries, they have the same. As I said, South Sudan also is not exceptional when it comes to that, because much as we have the subject in our curriculum, it's not an emphasis. And the point of Dr. Millicent is really good, that ICT should be made a compulsory subject for you to pass, to the university. Now, what should we do? Much as we have these challenges and, the digital divide. And I like the point earlier on that it also depends on the regions. For example, in a specific country, you find people in the urban areas, they tend to have access to internet and skills more than the people in the rural areas. And also when we look into gender, we find that in most of the cities, men have more access to digital skills and the internet more than the women. And so this is an ongoing challenge, which everyone can see it. But then what should we do? Much as the Western world, I don't want to say the Western world, but this is already part of us. When we talk about digital solutions, we talk about innovations. Right now, conversations on agri-tech, health, digital health, people are talking about e-commerce, people are talking about solutions from digital perspective. Now, the question is, who is going to do that? Who is going to support us? And that's been the very biggest one. From the conversations, I realized that it's very, very important if we focus on our literacy, because that is where we prepare the generation for this. We may not really achieve it 100%, but I believe that we can prepare the current generation right now through our literacy awareness, let people know that ICT is already part of us. And I used to share that ICT used to support, it was used to support us to our businesses, but now it's the leading. So we really need to know that ICT is key in our programming, in all that we do. So there should be more emphasis, for example, from the government side of making sure that ICT innovations are being supported. When people come up with those kind of innovations from the startup communities, I'm so much excited that I follow a lot from Ghana, I follow a lot from Nigeria, this kind of innovations. When I read about the Technovation girls, the solutions that they came up with, when I see in Ghana, young people are able to take opportunities online, because like me, I am a fellow of the Mandela Washington fellowship program. So what happened is this: when we always go, for these summits, we find that there are many young people from Nigeria, from Ghana and other parts of Africa. And I had a conversation with one of the young person who is from Nigeria, and I asked him, why is that there are more Nigerians on the program than other countries? And exactly this point of access to digital skills is the one that came in, because you find applications are done online. People without skills cannot go for those opportunities. So there should be a lot of awareness and building the capacities of these young people. Let them know what kind of opportunities are there and why it's necessary for us to have these skills. Well, also, the government plays a very important role. Recently, when Twitter was banned in Ghana, I mean, almost Africa, people made noise about it. In Uganda, you cannot access the internet, like social media platforms, without paying taxes. So you have to pay taxes for you to access other platforms, for you to communicate, for you to get information. So you find that the government policy, as being mentioned earlier on, is very, very important. Does the government really protect the people? Does the government have the interest in investing in technology? So this is the biggest question always. We've seen countries that are really investing on their technologies and trying to put in money. And also the private sector has a very, very important role. What I would say is that for example, those corporate companies, they should be able to use their corporate social responsibility to engage on activities that support digital literacy and also digital awareness in their communities. I'm very happy that I have a team of young people here from the university who are willing, and they go out, they talk about ICT, the importance of ICT. They even go to companies and tell them why they need to have websites. This is just a basic thing that here in South Sudan, there are people who are doing businesses, but their online presence is very, very poor. You cannot find what they do on the internet. And so there's a lot to do on ground than also when we say the government, but as individuals, we have a very important role to do. Lastly, in your house, I want to believe that some of you are married. How many of you husbands have bought smartphones for your wife? Many times you are on the internet, at least you have access to, what is happening online, but does your wife, have access to that kind of content? So also, it has to begin from home, this kind of inclusivity. Let's start from our families, and then we can go to our schools. From the schools, we can adopt it, and then so forth and so forth. Recently, during the time of the lockdowns, many churches, I want to talk in terms of the churches and maybe those who go to pray, they close down churches, but Nigeria, other countries, they are having online services, but other countries, they have totally closed. And that is because there is lack of the skills. To me, the issue of the skills and literacy awareness is very, very key when we want to make sure that we contribute in bridging this gap here.
Thank you so much. Like you've even gone ahead to talk about most of the angles I wanted to ask questions. So we've seen, like we used to say in our own part of the world, that charity begins at home. You find out that if we are going to get this thing done, we won't just be talking when we are not doing anything ourselves. So, and like you've mentioned the role of our own role as individuals, the role of government, and the one point that have resonated for me all through the conversation today has been that of awareness creation. Knowing that all of us, like you rightly mentioned here, even across the West African countries, we are not at the same level. The digital divide is, the gap is not the same across the countries. But in the one of the things we'll find out that is general, that our focus should be on, is awareness. Because like Dr. Millicent mentioned earlier on, I have seen a businessman I do business with in Nigeria that told me no matter whatever happens, that he cannot get a debit card because they've told him that his PIN on the debit card, they are going to is going to be compromised online. So now, as we are doing these things, the awareness is not just going to be on the skills only. It is also going to help us to counter some of the myths that, like Dr. Millicent mentioned earlier, and there are people who, even if you bring these devices, bring all these things to their room, but because of preconceived notions that they already have, they won't want to be part of it. So the awareness we are talking about has to cover all these areas. Please, I want to thank us. Please, we are not ending, but at this point, I will want us to open the microphone. Please, the technician, I want us to open the microphone. If you have questions, you are in the audience and you have any question for the speakers, at this point, you're going to indicate by raising your hand, and the technical people will give you the microphone to ask your questions. So I'm seeing Mohammed Sand. Mohammed, you can go on. You have the mic now. Ask your question.
Thank you. As the explanation concerning the digital inclusion, we have to look at it some way to make our effort now to make sure that the people they are not connected with technology. And we are talking about policy creation and policy government.
Please, Mohammed, because of your bandwidth, you can put off your video so that you can have an improved bandwidth. Mohammed, can you hear me? I say you can put off your video and just use your audio alone.
Okay.
Okay.
So based on some of these things, so if I develop some down to get policy implemented, most often we observe that from my experience, sometimes you come with policy for government to be implemented to get us a person that can be forthcoming. As a result, it can be a challenge for governments or for the implementation sometimes. It can be a challenge for those that expect to get support. If they're not giving support,
Mohammed, hello, Mohammed. We can barely hear you. Please, can you, if it's possible, can you type your question on the comment section? We can lift it from there because we can barely hear you. Thank you. Okay, while we wait for that, Enoch, can you ask your question?
Okay, thank you very much. Can I be heard, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I want to express my delight to be hearing these conversations. I'm a developer, and I am always very much impressed to see things around the internet and advocating to and ensure that people are able to use the internet to improve their lives. I want to ask this question on the issue of literacy, because I've realized that the digital skill divide is really a huge infringement on realizing the benefits of the digital economy. I was interacting with a secondary school graduate who is proceeding to the tertiary level right here in Ghana, and realized that she didn't even know what a browser was. But this person owns a smart device that connects to the internet. But what does he use it for? He only uses it to chat on WhatsApp, chat on Facebook, watch videos on YouTube. So you realize that it's true, the infrastructural gap is there, but the literacy and the awareness gap is even more. So as organizations which are out to ensure that people benefit from the use of digital advances, such as the Internet Society, we have infrastructural milestones that we seek to achieve. But do we have educational milestones or literacy milestones that 10,000 people should be trained on how to use technology to advance their businesses in Africa within the next 3 years? Do we have such milestones, and how are we working to achieve those milestones? Because the literacy and the skill gap is really a huge issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dennis, I don't know whether you got his question. I will want you to give a shot to that.
Sorry, I didn't get his question well. If you can just...
Enoch, if you can still hear me, please come back. Just go straight to the question, not too long, just briefly, straight to the question so that Dennis can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just
My question is, the question is that as organizations that seek to achieve or to bridge the digital divide, we have infrastructural milestones. For instance, we want to ensure that 1,000 communities are connected to the internet within the next 2 years. But do we have educational and skill development milestones? The skill development milestones that we also seek to achieve, well defined in our goals and objectives as organizations in this area. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I'll just give my response, and also my other colleagues, if they want to add on something, they can add on it. You talked about infrastructure and then connectivity, where the vision is to see that there's an infrastructure in place, and then at least people are connected to the internet. Now, you know, somebody said, I can't remember who said, but that this is a very collective responsibility for all of us to achieve. Because even as the private sector or even as the civil society, we cannot do much. But I believe that we all have a role to play. Perhaps the civil society can work on awareness and making sure that they create a lot of literacy awareness on digital skills and accessibility to the internet. And then as they do that, the government can be improving on the infrastructure, because that is also key. Now, based on South Sudan, where we had a lot of challenges going on recently, there was a lot of conflict. So you find that most of the areas and the states were disconnected from the city. because of insecurity and things like that. And so the telecom companies, they cannot do anything because they cannot access the places, and already their towers, were getting down, no electricity in those areas, they cannot have fuel in those areas. So it is a collective responsibility to achieve that people have at least access to internet. The government has its role, as a telecom companies also, they have their role, and also us as the people in the ecosystem, the startups and the civil society, we can also do our part collectively to make sure that at least everyone, 5 out of 10 people should have, access to good internet, access to, to the digital skills for them to go to the internet and then get opportunities that can support their business and day to day. So this is what I wanted to say. Maybe one of my colleagues also has something different from what I said. You can add it. Thank you.
Nashilongo or Dr. Millicent, do any of you want to dive in at this point?
Okay, I just want to ask something in brief. I think he's done justice to the question.
Yeah.
So unfortunately for me, from where I sit, I don't see that we have those milestones, unfortunately. So the issue with government, and most people have been, yes, the infrastructure, but like I said, the infrastructure access, it's not enough. It's way not enough. So we have this issue also of addressing data literacy, and especially in Ghana here, I say that literacy, it's not really the issue, but digital literacy, because a lot of people are quite educated, I must say here, the literacy rate is good in Ghana, but the digital literacy is what is the problem. So I think at our own various individual levels, we have to start to work on that, but we should put the agenda harder. Like I indicated, if ICT is made a compulsory course, I mean, it's not possible. Somebody will finish grade 9, he's well vested in ICT, he continues to the secondary school, he gets better at the university, and the person that's there, everything that he needs to know about a digital space, the person is knowledgeable about it. And so from a policy directive that should come from government, that is the solution that I can propose. If we put it in syllables, then definitely it becomes part of us. I mean, kids even teach their parents, I mean, it happens here, they go, they show them how you can do electronic transaction for your business. Some children are the ones handling all those things for their moms and so on and so forth. So we should incorporate that in the syllables, and I think that we are good to go. The years ahead will be brighter. Thank you.
All right. All right. Just coming in so they can attack Enoch, to add to what Dennis and Dr. Millicent have said. We are, because of that, the job, like Dennis asked earlier on, it was Nashilongo that made that statement that it is going to be a multi-sectoral approach. And that is what is driving the work we do at Paradigm Initiative. Because at Paradigm Initiative, we have our advocacy arm and our inclusion arm, where we go ahead and go into underserved communities to train them. But we don't stop at that, knowing that if we do that alone, what we can do will be limited. So our advocacy arm puts pressure in government, engage government, suggest policies, bring up bills that we take to the National Assembly that will drive what we are doing on the inclusion side. So like Dennis said, even you that is asking that question, every one of us on this call, we have our own role to play in one way or the other, either by creating awareness, either by teaching people in our own way, and either by engaging government, because we know that in everything we are doing, if we don't have a very the policy doesn't create an enabling environment for the other work we are going to do, there will be limited result from what we are doing. So in this thing, I will tell you that from our own part and from other people, we are following their work. Actions are going on where people are doing inclusion programs and also engaging government to make sure that policies that will create an enabling environment for those milestones to thrive are put in place. Thank you so much. And I want to, I'm seeing Vivete's hand up. and Nyete. So after Vivete, Nyete, you're going to come up. So Vivete, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, I'd just like to start by saying I love the conversation.
Yes.
I really enjoy the fact that we can have this conversation because we share the same challenges throughout Africa. I see 10 distinct challenges that we all share, and I would highly recommend that perhaps we tackle those challenges in individual conversations. However, my question today is to potentially Dr. Millicent, but it is open to all of the speakers. Dr. Millicent mentioned very early on that the implementation of policies is a big challenge, and I find that it seems it's one that we share. Policy and implementations are very distant cousins. However, we need that implementation desperately in order to create the environment to allow the digital economy to thrive within our countries. If we are to increase the literacy, I feel it becomes almost a white elephant if everybody is able to do these things, but the structures in the country are not there. So my question to Dr. Millicent is does she have any suggestions, or to anyone really on the panel, what is the suggestion to help drive the implementation of the policies, if they are there in the first place, in order to create the environment that will ease all of these challenges, well, to ease some of these challenges?
Yeah, hello, thank you very much. I think, like it's been said over and over, it's more of a multi-stakeholder approach. We cannot just place this at the doorstep of government, but when it comes to implementation, we have different levels of implementation. So we all have to be involved. Me, as a person, every opportunity that I get, I talk about digital inclusion for persons with disability. That's what I personally do. So I talk a lot about it. And if you come to my institution here where I lecture, you realize that if a deaf person or a blind person, very qualified, wants to come here and offer any course of its choice, he'll not be able to do so. We don't have an inclusive ICT lab. And as a university, we don't have any disability mainstream policy. And so I have been advocating for that. I've been talking about that. And currently, I was part of the committee that we've drafted the disability policy. And so what I want to say is, in our own space, we can start from there. At the high level, of course, I wish the government would have taken inclusive education policy, which it actually drafted so many years ago, about 7 years, seriously, and make sure that this institution where I am, also being a public university, should have an inclusive lab so that it's open to anybody who wants to come here and study. But that is not the case. So in my own space, I'm driving and pushing that we as a university should have a disability mainstream policy. So right from the person being enrolled at the admission level, we should give on the form. Currently on our form, we don't even ask if you have any disability for you to indicate. So you can imagine. So we are now trying to change the form to say, okay, do you have any disability? And once the person states it, we begin preparation to make sure that we can accommodate the person and make sure that he has a very successful learning when he's enrolled. And so implementation comes at various levels, and we all have to start something. Currently, I am talking to our municipal director, of course, who represents government in our space here. I've sent in a proposal there for us to have an inclusive laboratory here where persons with disability can feel comfortable to enroll and come and know that they'll have equal opportunity in terms of learning and the quality that they will receive. So yes, that is me in my space. So we all have a role to play, various levels of implementation. And when you talk to people, then you realize they have no idea what is going on. Somebody will say, really? So does a blind person use computer? Can you explain to me how he's able to use computer? And then you begin to educate them. You're creating more awareness. You also tell another person. That is how the message goes. So it's a multi-stakeholder approach. we'll get every opportunity, and then we try to push and talk more for government to implement it, because obviously that is where it should start from. But at our own levels, we have different levels of implementation. We should start up something. We cannot just afford to sit and wait. The time is now.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much. Vivet, I think your question was probably answered. Nyetefe, you can open your mic and ask your question.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear from me. I'm Nyetefe Olali from Togo. Yesterday, I was asking a question on the West African School for Internet and for Internet Governance, but unfortunately, we didn't have such time to answer it. The fact is, our government has enforced a law which limited the number of SIM card that a person can own. It has been limited to 3. Yesterday, I wanted to know how it's going on in the other countries, but unfortunately, it was not answered so much. Why I was asking the question is, the fact is most of people living in the rural space do not have, they do not have identification card. So they rely on people who have such documents to buy SIM card in order to identify them for them to use. So they can use mobile phone for their transaction, for example, mobile money. But now it has been limited to only 3 number for per person. So for me, it's like the government is enforcing a law which is excluding some people again from the digitalization. So if you can give me some approach of solution, it could be great. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me, Nyetefe? Because
yes,
of time,
I can hear from you.
Your question is, like I said earlier on, there are different strokes for different folk. Let me give you an example. In my own country, Nigeria, like you're saying, there's a policy that no matter wherever you are in the country, you are supposed to be registered and you have an identification number. And what is happening in Nigeria is that it is even a risk for you to register your number for another person, not minding the situation. Because in Nigeria, you find out that they can steal your number and use it to commit crime. And once the person commits any crime, it is you who your identification instrument was used in registering that number that will be held responsible. So on the other way, depending on the angle where we are talking, in as much as we are talking about inclusion, we are not just not looking at the dangers that might come from some of the things we are doing. But when we are talking about inclusion, we are talking about inclusion that will be risk-free. If the government is saying that there is people should stop at 3, if they are what we should be driving at is let government have a means of getting those people in the rural area to get that identification instrument that can help them to acquire their own lines. So it should not be in the situation what government is trying to do. It's also for our own security as individuals to make sure that each number out there has someone that it is that can be what we call attached to it. So on this side, I'm going to suggest that what we are going to do, the kind of engagement you are supposed to do is to get government to make sure that they have a way of getting those people in the rural area to get their identification instrument so that it can enable them get their phone lines. I don't know whether that helped you.
Yes, actually, it is a good approach. But the fact is, even though there is policy which force everybody to be identified, the fact is there is no much, I mean, the government doesn't put enough means to help them to be identified. Most of the time, it is during the election that people get their election card ID, okay, in order to I mean, for the polls. But what I mean, what can be done is to identify every citizen at his best, as as developing country do. But unfortunately, it is not like this in our developing country. So that's why people rely on their relationship. For example, if someone is literate and his parents do not have the ID card, their children can buy it for them. You see, it depends on the relationship that they have. Now they are limited it, so it means that this parent who live in a rural area far from the cities and who do not have identification number is totally excluded for the network.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that we don't waste our time here. If I might go by your own example, I'm going to do that and we'll move to the next person. Like I'm going to make it look like if I'm literate, if I'm literate, I think I should make every effort to get my parents formally registered and get them at their own identification. That would be their benefit for having a literate child or a literate son. So let's come from there, because what we are looking at most times is, like we said, that this thing is a multi-stakeholder approach. We should not just look at one end only. There are some things me and you should do to bridge these gaps. You've identified the gap. So what can we, you and people in your community do to get as much persons as possible to get registered so that they can have access to their online? That will be your own way of contributing in solving this particular exclusion problem. Thank you so much. Biaminu, can you open your mouth and ask your question?
Yeah, hello everyone. Going by the theme of the discussion, bridging the digital divide for an inclusive digital economy. From the discussion from the speakers, the three of the speakers wonderfully spoken. Literacy, digital literacy has been at the top. But if we look at the West Africa and Africa to say, the majority of the people that are being excluded to say the fact are in the rural areas. And the people in the rural area, they have their native languages, their local language which they speak. Now, how do we get them involved? Going by the digital literacy that every speaker has been advocating so that they can be included in this digital economy. Thank you very much. That's my question.
All right. Nashilongo, can you take this?
Thank you, Biaminu. Sorry for murdering your name there. Yeah, the issue of language usage on technology has been a bigger challenge than we have imagined. And I'm glad that you raised that issue as a challenge that furthers the digital divide on the continent. It is something that we should, or we could do something about. That could start again from wherever you are. You know, if you have access to the funding, for instance, implement a project that is literally just you know, focusing on you know, language usage on technology at that specific level. But that does not also to say that there has been also some increase. For instance, we're seeing more content created online by locals, obviously, but within the languages, in languages that they are more fluent about. For instance, we've seen more and more bloggers and more video YouTubers, you know, creating content in the languages that they use, because for a long time, like you've mentioned, that has been a stumbling block. People couldn't connect to the technology because the languages are very, very diverse. The language becomes a challenge. For instance, in Namibia, I think like in Ghana, the literacy levels are very high, like everybody has, like Dr. Millicent was sharing. But with the digital skills, that means then for me to be able to sign up onto a platform, for instance, where English is major language, it could be a challenge on how I use it. The technicalities, the kind of language, what is a browser? I think somebody have mentioned issues of, you know, just the technical languages or the digital language, that the language that we use in the digital space or the digital access. What is a browser? Where do I need to, what is uploading? You know, that goes beyond your mainstream usage of language. But like I said, it is encouraging to see more and more content creators, for instance, creating content in the language that is spoken within their communities, but also seeing applications that are doing the translations. For instance, we're seeing websites built in local languages. From the continent, we have obviously observed other, efforts that I think are beneficial to the continent at large. For instance, we might have learned that the Mozilla Foundation is implementing a continental project that is targeting Swahili, I want to believe, which is one of the continent's most spoken languages, to make sure that to help bridge that gap, or even bridge the digital gap that exists, that if people are able to use a common language on the continent, that it will be able to help them harmonize, but also increase uptake on technologies and usage, and consequently contribute to the digital economy. But there's also another factor that I wanted to touch on, in addition to language, which is really also a personal interest for me, which is the women access online. The internet, as much as the digital divide is widened also by the violence that exists online, where more and more women cannot relate or are not able to stay online because they're subjected to violence, to bullying, to threatening, to actually efforts of pushing them online, and that also furthers the gap that exists in access the digital divide. I think my colleague Denaya has related a bit to that. As a man, do you avail those the same technologies that you have access to your wife to get online? But more and more women get driven offline by the violence that exists there. For a woman, for instance, who holds a voice on the online space, it becomes very, very difficult when you are told, for instance, maybe you are not beautiful enough, or your beauty or your looks are used to counter arguments or the narrative or the discourses that you are engaged on. So there's a lot of dimensions that we should be able to unpack when we're talking about the digital divide. And I'm also happy to note that Dr. Millicent has been very persistent in raising the issue of the visually and also hearing impaired communities. That becomes a challenge. As much as we want to proceed or to advance in the digital economy and make sure that everybody benefits, let's not leave out those who who are challenged to get that access. And that's beyond the literacy that we have been pondering on. Thank you, Luisa.
Thank you so much, Nashilongo. Thank you. I'm taking this to be part of your parting word for us too. So at this point, I'm going to give, because we have only a few seconds left, I'm going to ask, I've asked Dr. Millicent and Dennis to give us their parting words, but because our time has been fast spent, please, I will ask that you bear with me. For everyone that participated, I saw the lot of conversation and engagement that was going on the comment section. It has been a very wonderful session for us. The word I want each and every one of us to take home today is that this is a multi-sectoral. That means me and you are supposed to be involved in the course of solving this particular problem. All the challenges that we identified, all the solutions that we provide, we will not see the result unless each and every one of us come on board to make sure that we get this achieved. Even the one of, even when we are talking about localizing the contents and each and every one of them, we have a great role to play in all this. On behalf of my organization, on PADAM Initiative, on behalf of the organizers of the West African Internet Governance Forum, I want to thank each and every one of us that participated. And I know that we are going home with something that we are going to take action on. Thank you so much, and God bless all of us. You're welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this discussion. Very insightful and educative discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Good job, Mr. Eze. Thank you for coordinating.
Thank you.
It's nice connecting again.
Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Well done, sir.
Thank you all. It was a nice learning from you all. Have a wonderful time. I look forward to another event like this also.
The land is good, the land is fine. Gold we have, diamonds we mine. Yet we fight, we cover it all in blood. Tell me why we wallow in the mud. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa. The land is good, the land is fine. Gold we have, diamonds we mine. Yet we fight, we cover it all in blood. Tell me why we wallow in the mud. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa. Nisambuka tigi kayora. Nisambuka tigi kayora. Nisambuka tigi kayora. Nisambuka tigi kayora. Tell me why you fight. Tell me why we fight. Tell me why you fight. Tell me why we fight.
All right, so thank you everyone for joining this session. So looking forward to seeing you in the other sessions. We're going to have another sessions on connecting the unconnected, revitalize digital transformation, and promoting domain name system as next session. Start from 11. Thank you all and have a wonderful day. See you again in the next session. Bye.
Thank you and bye-bye everyone. See you in the next session. Bye.